Her true story from Alaska. Old woman, broken heart. My son said, "You can stay, if you babysit." I changed the diaper, then changed the deed. They didn't know I owned that $7.5 million home, and could take it back with one call. They had no idea that upstairs in my bedroom drawer, tucked between Harold's old love letters and my reading glasses, sat the original deed to this property. My name. My signature. My investment that had grown from a $200,000 gamble into a $7.5 million mountain estate. Have you ever been made to feel like a burden by your own family? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The wealthy widow signed away her $7.5 million Alaska estate with a single phone call, to teach her ungrateful son the hardest lesson of his life, because he never knew she owned everything he thought was his. Have you ever been treated like free labor by your own family? Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Do you know someone whose children forgot their sacrifices? When respect dies, sometimes drastic action is the only language left. What would you do if your child reduced you to a live-in servant? Stay tuned, this grandmother's revenge will shock you. If you've ever felt undervalued by family, this story will resonate deeply. Let's discover how one woman reclaimed her power. Let me take you back to that frozen December morning when everything changed. That morning in Anchorage, my son looked me in the eye and said, "You can stay, but only if you babysit full-time." He thought he was being generous. Snow was falling outside those floor-to-ceiling windows, each flake catching the morning light like tiny diamonds. The cedar walls of this massive estate stretched up 2 stories, and that stone fireplace crackled with warmth. But inside my chest, ice cold. Daniel stood there in his $1,000 jacket, arms crossed like he was doing me some grand favor. His wife Jessica nodded along, bouncing little Emma on her hip. They'd been whispering about me for weeks since I moved in after my hip surgery. Now they were finally saying it out loud. "Mom, you know we love having you here," Daniel continued, his voice carrying that fake sweetness I'd grown to hate. "But Emma needs constant attention, and Jessica's got her yoga classes and book club meetings." I looked around this house, these walls I'd watched rise from nothing but Alaskan wilderness 23 years ago. The custom kitchen where Harold and I had shared countless morning coffees, planning our future. The master bedroom upstairs where we'd celebrated each real estate deal with champagne and passion that made my heart race even now, remembering his strong hands guiding me toward the bed. "Of course, dear," I said quietly, reaching for Emma. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, trusting and innocent. "I'd be happy to help." Jessica's face lit up with relief. "Oh, Eleanor, you're a lifesaver." I was dreading the cost of a full-time nanny. "Do you know how much they charge these days?" $4,000 a month. Daniel laughed. "Yeah, Mom, you're saving us a fortune. Consider it your rent payment." Rent payment. In my own house. They had no idea that upstairs in my bedroom drawer, tucked between Harold's old love letters and my reading glasses, sat the original deed to this property. My name. My signature. My investment that had grown from a $200,000 gamble into a $7.5 million mountain estate. Harold used to tell me I was most dangerous when I stayed quiet. When I smiled and nodded while my mind calculated every angle, every possibility. He'd see that look in my eyes during business negotiations and know someone was about to get schooled. "There's just one thing," Jessica added, not bothering to lower her voice. "We'll need you available 7 days a week. Emma's schedule is very demanding." 7 days a week. Like a live-in maid with grandparent privileges. I bounced Emma gently, her baby smell mixing with the scent of cedar and coffee. This child would never know her grandfather Harold, never hear his stories about building wealth from nothing, never learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the power. "And Mom," Daniel continued, "we'll need you to handle the night feedings too. Jessica needs her beauty sleep." Beauty sleep. While I, a 68-year-old woman recovering from major surgery, handled diaper duty at 3 a.m. But I smiled. I nodded. I cooed at my granddaughter while my son and his wife discussed my terms of employment in my own home. The morning light shifted through those windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors Harold and I had personally selected. I remembered the day we'd closed on this land, a steal at $200,000 because nobody wanted to build this far out. Harold had spun me around right here in what was then just a clearing, promising me we'd create something beautiful together. We had. And now my son thought he'd inherited it all. "I'll take good care of Emma," I promised, meaning every word. But my definition of good care included teaching her that respect flows both ways, that family means more than free services, and that her grandmother wasn't just some convenient babysitter. Daniel clapped his hands together. "Perfect. Jessica, didn't I tell you Mom would be reasonable about this?" Reasonable. That word would haunt him later. I watched them walk away, already planning their child-free afternoon. Jessica grabbed her yoga mat while Daniel checked his phone for golf times. Neither looked back at me holding their daughter. The fire crackled. Emma gurgled softly. And I smiled, cradling my granddaughter while my mind worked through possibilities they couldn't imagine. I smiled and nodded, cradling baby Emma. But what they didn't know was the deed upstairs in my bedroom drawer, signed in my name. Have you ever been made to feel like a burden by your own family? Share your experience below. The next morning, I discovered Jessica in my bedroom, rifling through Harold's memory box like it was a garage sale. She held up his favorite fishing photo, the one where he's grinning beside that massive salmon he caught on our anniversary trip to Kenai Peninsula. His eyes were so alive in that picture, so proud. We'd made love in our tent that night while rain drummed overhead, celebrating both his catch and the land deal that would set our future. "This old stuff is just taking up space," Jessica muttered, tossing Harold's photo into a cardboard box labeled "Donate." My chest tightened. Harold's Bronze Star from Vietnam landed on top of the photo with a metallic clink. Then his favorite coffee mug, the one that said, "World's Best Real Estate Investor." A joke gift I'd bought him after our third property purchase. "Jessica." My voice came out steady, but my hands trembled as I reached for Harold's photo. "These aren't going anywhere." She looked up, surprised to find me standing there. "Oh. Eleanor, I didn't hear you come in." "I was just decluttering." "You have so much stuff." "Stuff." 43 years of marriage reduced to stuff. "This is my room," I said quietly, carefully lifting Harold's Bronze Star from the donation pile. The metal felt warm in my palm, like it still carried his courage. "These are my belongings." Jessica's face flushed pink, but not from embarrassment. From annoyance. "Well, yes, but Daniel and I were thinking you might be more comfortable in the smaller guest room downstairs. This master suite is really meant for the homeowners." Homeowners. In my house. I stood there holding Harold's war medal while this woman, who'd married into our family 3 years ago, told me where I belonged in the home Harold and I had built from scratch. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles floating like tiny ghosts of memory. This room held everything. Harold carrying me over the threshold after our wedding. Late-night conversations about expanding our real estate portfolio. The way his hands would find me in the darkness, making me feel desired and powerful and alive. "I think I'll stay right here," I said, placing Harold's Bronze Star back on my dresser exactly where it belonged. Jessica's mouth tightened. "But Eleanor, this room has the best view, the private bathroom, the walk-in closet. Daniel and I really need the space." Need. Not want. Need. I picked up Harold's coffee mug, remembering how he'd drink his morning coffee while reviewing property listings spread across our bed. We'd made love on those same papers once, laughing about christening our business plans. The memory sent warmth through my body that had nothing to do with the fireplace. "I appreciate your concern," I said, my voice carrying just enough steel to make her pause. "But I'm comfortable here." Jessica's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by me. In her mind, I was the live-in help now, not the lady of the house. Fine, she huffed. But all this old junk needs to go. It's depressing. Old junk. Harold's purple heart. His reading glasses. The love letters he'd written during his oil rig rotations, promising to build me a castle when he got home. We'd built that castle, all right. And now his daughter-in-law wanted to throw his memory in the trash. After Jessica left, I sat on the edge of my bed, our bed, and opened Harold's memory box properly. Each item told our story. The deed to our first rental property, signed when Daniel was still in high school. The champagne cork from the night we became millionaires. A pressed flower from my wedding bouquet. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, I found the original land survey for this estate. Harold's handwriting in the margins, calculating costs and dreaming out loud in blue ink. For my beautiful Eleanor, he'd written. Our mountain kingdom. Our kingdom. Not Daniel's. Not Jessica's. Ours. I traced Harold's signature with my fingertip, remembering how those same fingers used to trace my skin in this very bed. How he'd whisper against my neck about our plans, our future, our legacy. The power we were building together, acre by acre, deal by deal. The phone buzzed downstairs. Jessica's voice carried up through the floor vents. No, Mom, she won't move to the guest room. She's being stubborn about it. Pause. I know, right? At her age, you'd think she'd want something smaller and easier to manage. At my age. Like 68 meant invisible, powerless, grateful for scraps. I opened my jewelry box and pulled out the key Harold had given me on our 20th anniversary. Not to a car or a safe deposit box, but to this house. You're the queen of our castle, he'd said, pressing the key into my palm. Never let anyone make you forget that. The key felt solid and real in my hand. Like Harold's love. Like our shared dreams. Like the power I'd temporarily forgotten but was starting to remember. She threw Harold's bronze star in the donation pile. That's when something inside me snapped. What family heirlooms mean the most to you? How would you react if someone called them worthless? 2 weeks later, while changing Emma's diaper in the nursery, I heard them laughing downstairs through the baby monitor. Emma gurgled happily on the changing table, her tiny legs kicking at the mobile Harold had installed when Daniel was a baby. The same mobile that had entertained my son 32 years ago, back when this nursery was his room and I was the young mother, not the hired help. The monitor crackled with static, then Jessica's voice came through crystal clear. I can't believe how perfect this worked out, she giggled. We're saving $4,000 a month on childcare. Daniel's laughter joined hers. I told you Mom would cave. She's desperate for a place to live. Desperate. For a place to live. In my own house. Emma's diaper tabs made a soft ripping sound as I secured them, my hands working automatically while my mind processed what I was hearing. The baby monitor I'd bought to keep track of Emma was broadcasting their private conversation from the kitchen below. Your mom's actually pretty good with Emma, Jessica admitted. Better than those agencies we interviewed. Of course she is, Daniel replied. She raised me, didn't she? Plus, she's got nothing else to do with her time now. Nothing else to do. Like managing a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio was nothing. I lifted Emma to my shoulder, her warm weight comforting against my chest. This innocent child had no idea her parents were discussing her grandmother like a desperate servant grateful for shelter. The best part, Jessica continued, is that she can't complain about overtime or benefits. Family doesn't charge extra for night shifts. Their laughter echoed through the monitor like glass breaking. I looked at myself in the nursery mirror, the same mirror where I'd once admired my pregnant belly carrying Daniel. Now I saw what they saw, an older woman in comfortable clothes, holding their baby while they enjoyed their freedom. In their eyes, I'd become invisible except for my usefulness. But mirrors can be deceiving. They only show the surface. I feel a little guilty sometimes, Jessica's voice continued. She gave up her apartment to move in here. Gave up my apartment. Not sold my apartment to help with Daniel's student loans. Not moved out of my apartment because they begged me to come help after Emma was born. Gave up, like I was lucky they'd taken me in. Don't feel guilty, Daniel said firmly. She's lucky we have the space. Otherwise, she'd be looking at assisted living facilities. Assisted living. At 68, with a sharp mind and a multi-million-dollar net worth, my son thought I belonged in assisted living. Emma's tiny fist wrapped around my finger, her grip surprisingly strong. Just like Harold's hands had been strong. Just like mine would need to be. I carried Emma to the rocking chair Harold had bought for Daniel's birth. The same chair where I'd nursed my son, sung him lullabies, dreamed about his future. Now he was downstairs planning my life like I had no say in it. The monitor crackled again. Should we give her an allowance? Jessica asked. You know, for personal expenses? An allowance. Like a teenager earning pocket money for chores. Maybe $50 a week? Daniel suggested. That seems fair for round-the-clock babysitting. $50 a week. $200 a month. While I unknowingly funded their lifestyle with property investments that generated more than their combined salaries. I rocked Emma gently, her breathing evening out as she drifted toward sleep. Harold used to rock Daniel in this same chair, whispering stories about building our empire. How we'd started with nothing but love and determination. How every sacrifice was worth it for our family's future. We should probably set some ground rules, Jessica continued. Like, no having friends over without asking. And she needs to check with us before making any big purchases. Ground rules. In my house. For my money. Emma's eyes fluttered closed, her face peaceful and trusting. She had no idea that her college fund already existed in investments her parents knew nothing about. No idea that her trust fund was already larger than most people's retirement accounts. No idea that her grandmother wasn't the desperate old woman everyone thought she was. I stood carefully, placing Emma in her crib. The mobile turned slowly above her, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Harold had painted those walls himself, insisting on doing the work even though we could afford contractors by then. This is our legacy, he'd told me, brush in hand. Every board, every nail, every drop of paint makes it ours. Our legacy. Built with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love. And now my son was charging me rent to live in it. The monitor fell silent. I heard chair legs scraping against the kitchen floor, footsteps moving toward the living room. They'd finished discussing my terms of employment and moved on to other topics. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled to my attorney's contact information. Robert Patterson had handled our real estate deals for 20 years. He'd drawn up Harold's will. He knew exactly what I owned and what I didn't. My finger hovered over his number. Emma made a soft sound in her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. She deserved better than parents who saw family as free labor. She deserved to know her grandmother as more than just the help. I heard Jessica whisper, "We're saving $4,000 a month on childcare." That's when I remembered who really pays the bills here. When did you realize someone was taking advantage of your kindness? What was your breaking point? That night, after Daniel and Jessica went to bed, I climbed the stairs to my room and opened the file cabinet Harold and I had shared for 40 years. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting everything in silver shadows. The same moonlight that had watched Harold and I make love in this room countless times, our bodies moving together as we whispered about our dreams, our plans, our growing wealth. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the thick manila folder labeled Real Estate Holdings. Harold's neat handwriting covered the tab in black ink. Inside, our life's work lay organized in perfect order. The first document made my breath catch. The original purchase agreement for this land, dated March 15, 1987. $200,000 for 60 acres of undeveloped wilderness outside Anchorage. Back then, people thought we were crazy for building so far from town. I spread the papers across my bed like a treasure map, each deed representing years of sacrifice and smart decisions. The downtown Anchorage rental property we bought in 1991, now worth $800,000. The commercial building we'd purchased during the 2008 recession when everyone else was selling, current value $1.2 million. Harold's signature appeared on each document beside mine. Harold and Eleanor Patterson, joint tenants with right of survivorship. Every property, every investment, every financial victory we'd achieved together. But after Harold's death 3 years ago, the lawyer had transferred everything into my name alone. I'd been too grief-stricken to pay attention to the details. Now, looking at these updated deeds, I realized the full scope of what I owned. 7 properties total. The mountain estate where I currently lived, $7.5 million. 6 rental properties throughout Anchorage, combined value $4.2 million. Plus investment accounts, certificates of deposit, and Harold's pension benefits. I was worth nearly $15 million. And my son thought I was desperate for his charity. I picked up the deed to this estate, tracing the legal description with my fingertip. Lot 47, Mountain View Estates, 60 acres, including all improvements and structures thereon. Harold's dream home, built exactly to our specifications. Every cedar beam, every stone in the fireplace, every custom detail we'd planned together. The memory hit me suddenly, Harold pinning me against these very file cabinets the night we'd closed on our 3rd rental property. His lips on my neck, his hands working the buttons of my blouse, whispering how proud he was of my business instincts. How sexy I looked when I negotiated contracts. How much he loved building this empire with me. "We're not just rich, Eleanor," he'd said, his breath warm against my skin. "We're smart. And that makes us dangerous." Smart and dangerous. I'd forgotten how good that felt. A folder marked "Estate Planning" caught my attention. Inside, Harold's will and my updated documents from the attorney. Everything legal, everything binding. Daniel was listed as beneficiary, but only after my death. Until then, every brick, every board, every dollar belonged to me alone. There was also a letter Harold had written to me, sealed and marked, to be opened when you need to remember who you are. My hands shook as I broke the seal. My beautiful Eleanor. If you're reading this, I'm gone and you're probably doubting yourself. Don't. You were the brains behind our success, the strength behind our dreams. I just provided the muscle. You made me millions, but more than that, you made me proud. Never let anyone, not even our son, make you forget your worth. You're not just my widow. You're a businesswoman, a property mogul, a force of nature. If someone treats you like you're powerless, show them these papers. Show them who you really are. All my love, Harold. P.S. The combination to the safe deposit box is our anniversary date. Inside you'll find something that will make you smile. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling Harold's love across the years. He'd known this day might come. Known I might need reminding of my own strength. The safe deposit box. I'd forgotten about it completely. I gathered all the deeds into a neat stack, Harold's letter on top. Tomorrow I would visit the bank. Tonight, I would remember what it felt like to hold real power in my hands. Downstairs, the house settled with soft creaks and sighs. My house. My walls. My floors. Built with my money, maintained with my investments, owned entirely by me. Daniel and Jessica slept peacefully in the guest room, dreaming their small dreams while I held the papers that could change their world with a single phone call. 7 properties. All in my name. Including this $7.5 million estate they think they own. Have you ever held a secret that could change everything? How long did you keep it? The next morning, while Daniel and Jessica took Emma to her doctor's appointment, I dialed Robert Patterson's office with hands that barely shook. Eleanor. Robert's warm voice filled my ear like sunshine after rain. How wonderful to hear from you. How are you settling in with Daniel and his family? Settling in. Like I was the guest in my own home. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. I sat in Harold's leather chair, my chair now, surrounded by the property deeds I'd spread across the desk. If I wanted Daniel and Jessica to leave this house, could I make that happen legally? Silence stretched across the phone line. Then Robert cleared his throat. Eleanor, are you asking about your own property? Yes. This estate. The one they think they inherited. Robert's chuckle surprised me. Eleanor, sweetheart, you can evict them with 30 days' notice. It's your house. Your name on the deed. Your property taxes being paid from your accounts. My property taxes. Of course. The monthly automatic payments I'd never questioned, assuming Daniel was handling them. But they came from my investment account, not his checking account. What about the other properties? I asked, my voice growing stronger. All yours. Every single one. Harold's will was crystal clear, everything transfers to you first, then to Daniel after your passing. Until then, you're the sole owner of approximately $14.8 million in assets. $14.8 million. I'd grown richer since Harold's death without even trying. Robert, I said carefully, what would happen if I decided to restructure Daniel's living situation? Another pause. Eleanor, what's really going on? The words poured out of me like water through a broken dam. The babysitting demands. Jessica throwing away Harold's belongings. Their conversations about my allowance and their saved childcare costs. How they treated me like desperate hired help instead of the woman who owned everything around them. Robert's breathing grew heavy as I spoke. He'd known Harold and me for 20 years, handled our business deals, celebrated our successes. He understood what we'd built together. Jesus, Eleanor. I had no idea. They don't know I own any of this, I admitted. They think Harold left everything to Daniel. Well, that ends now. Robert's voice carried the steel I remembered from contract negotiations. I'm preparing eviction notices today. 30 days is more than generous. Wait. My heart raced like it used to when Harold would kiss my neck during important phone calls, his hands reminding me of my power even while conducting business. I want to think about this overnight. Eleanor, you don't owe them anything. This is your property. I know. But Daniel is still my son. And you're still his mother, not his employee. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my own home, feeling the weight of absolute power for the first time in years. I could end their comfortable life with a single signature. Could force them to confront the reality of their situation. The front door slammed. Emma's crying echoed through the entryway. Mom. Daniel called. We're back. Emma needs her lunch. Not Eleanor or Grandma. Just Mom, like I was staff responding to orders. I listened to their footsteps, their casual conversation about stopping for coffee on the way home. Coffee they'd bought with money from allowances paid by jobs they could maintain because I provided free childcare. The irony was delicious. Jessica's voice carried from the kitchen. Did you see how that barista looked at your mom? Like she felt sorry for her, carrying the baby while we ordered. People probably think she's the nanny, Daniel laughed. At her age, that's basically what she is. At her age. The nanny. I opened my laptop and logged into my investment account. The balance made me smile, larger than Daniel's annual salary, growing daily through compound interest and rental income. Money I'd earned through decades of smart decisions and sacrifices. The same money that funded their lifestyle while they mocked me. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Eleanor, I've drafted the papers. Just say the word. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. One word could change everything. Could force them to see me as I really was, not Harold's helpless widow, but his equal partner who'd helped build our empire. The crying upstairs stopped. Emma had found comfort in her crib, surrounded by toys I'd bought, in a nursery I'd decorated, in a house I owned. I typed back, send me the papers. I need to see them first. Already done. Check your email. My laptop chimed with a new message. The eviction notice appeared on screen, official and binding. 30 days to vacate. Reason: owner occupancy. Owner occupancy. Such simple words for such devastating power. I printed the document, my hands steady now. The printer's soft whirring sounded like victory. Like Harold's satisfied sighs after we'd closed another profitable deal. Downstairs, Daniel and Jessica discussed their evening plans. Dinner out, just the two of them, while I watched Emma. Another date night funded by rental income they knew nothing about. I folded the eviction notice carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, right next to Harold's letter. 2 pieces of paper that could reshape my world. The power felt intoxicating, like the rush I used to get when Harold would pin me against the wall after successful negotiations, his lips claiming mine with passionate pride. I felt alive, desired, dangerous again. But I wasn't ready to use that power yet. Not tonight. Tonight, I would watch them take their freedom for granted one more time. Watch them treat me like the help while I held their future in my hands. Tomorrow, decisions would be made. My lawyer chuckled. Eleanor, you can evict them with 30 days' notice. It's your house. The power felt intoxicating. What's the most empowering phone call you've ever made? Tell us about reclaiming your power. For the next 2 weeks, I played the perfect grandmother while my mind calculated every slight, every expense, every moment they took my generosity for granted. Wednesday morning, I served Daniel his coffee in Harold's favorite mug, the one Jessica had tried to donate. Black coffee, 2 sugars, exactly how he'd liked it since college. The same coffee I bought with money from rental properties he didn't know existed. Thanks, Mom, he said without looking up from his phone. By the way, Emma's pediatrician appointment is at 2. You'll need to take her. Not, would you mind taking Emma, or, could you help us out? Just, you'll need to. Like I was staff receiving instructions. I smiled and nodded, mentally adding pediatrician visits to my list of unpaid services. Of course, dear. Jessica breezed into the kitchen wearing a workout outfit that cost more than most people's monthly groceries. The yoga pants alone were $200. I knew because I'd seen her Instagram posts bragging about them. Eleanor, would you mind picking up my dry cleaning after Emma's appointment? I'm meeting the girls for lunch and then we're getting manicures. The girls. Her book club friends who never read books, just gossiped over expensive wine about their husband's success. Success funded partly by the woman they pitted for being stuck with babysitting duties. No problem, I replied, buttering toast I'd bought with my money in my kitchen while they planned their leisure time around my free labor. That afternoon, carrying Emma through the pediatrician's office, I caught my reflection in the waiting room mirror. Other people saw what Daniel and Jessica saw, an older woman in comfortable clothes, doing family duty with her granddaughter. But I saw something different now. I saw Harold's business partner. The woman who'd negotiated half our property deals while he handled construction details. The investor who'd spotted undervalued lots before anyone else recognized their potential. The woman who currently owned everything her son thought he'd inherited. At the dry cleaner, Jessica's silk blouses cost $40 to clean. $40 for shirts she wore to lunch dates while I changed diapers and wiped counters. I paid with cash from my purse, funded by dividends from investments that generated more per month than their combined salaries. That evening, I cooked dinner while they discussed their weekend plans. I booked us that couple spa package, Jessica announced, feeding Emma while I stirred the sauce. Saturday and Sunday in Girdwood. The mountain views are supposed to be amazing. What about Emma? Daniel asked. Well, your mom's here. She loves spending time with her granddaughter. Loves spending time. Not, would your mom mind watching Emma, or, should we check if Eleanor has plans? They'd simply assumed my weekend belonged to them. 2 days at a luxury spa cost more than most people's monthly rent. Money they could spend because they saved $4,000 monthly on childcare thanks to their live-in grandmother. I continued cooking, calculating the cost of their getaway against the rental income from properties they'd never heard of. The downtown building alone generated enough monthly profit to cover their spa weekend twice over. After dinner, I cleaned dishes while they relaxed in the living room I'd decorated, watching television on the screen I'd purchased, discussing their plans for my time. "Your mom seems happy enough," Jessica said, her voice carrying through the open kitchen doorway. "She is," Daniel replied. "This arrangement works out great for everyone. She gets a beautiful place to live, Emma gets family care instead of strangers, and we save money. Great for everyone. Except the woman scrubbing their dishes after cooking their food after watching their child after paying their bills without their knowledge." I dried Harold's favorite serving bowl, remembering how his eyes would light up when I'd use my business instincts outside of real estate. Like the time I'd negotiated our insurance rates down by 40%, or talked a contractor into premium materials at standard prices. "You're wasted on just me," he'd whisper against my ear afterwards, his hands roaming my body with appreciation that went far beyond the physical. "You could run corporations, Eleanor. You could rule the world. Maybe I couldn't rule the world. But I could definitely rule this house." That night, while they watched movies in the living room, I sat at my computer researching property management companies. If I decided to move forward with eviction, I'd need professional help handling the transition. The rental income statements made fascinating reading. Properties I'd forgotten about generating steady profits, accounts growing through compound interest, investments Harold and I had made yielding returns beyond our wildest dreams. I was richer than I'd realized. And getting richer every day. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Eleanor, those papers are still waiting whenever you're ready." I stared at the message while laughter echoed from downstairs. My son and his wife, comfortable and carefree, planning their luxury weekend while the woman funding their lifestyle sat upstairs calculating her next move. Tomorrow, Jessica would ask me to reorganize the pantry because she didn't like how I'd arranged things. Daniel would remind me that Emma preferred her bottles warm to exactly the right temperature, as if I hadn't raised him with the same careful attention. They'd continue taking my generosity for granted while I smiled and nodded and remembered what it felt like to hold real power. I watched Jessica complain about the grocery bill while wearing the $800 boots I unknowingly funded. My smile never wavered. Have you ever played dumb while planning something brilliant? How did it feel to hold that secret? The baby monitor betrayed them again on a Thursday evening, broadcasting their cruelest conversation yet while I folded laundry in the room above. Emma was sleeping peacefully in her crib, tiny chest rising and falling with perfect innocence. I'd just finished organizing her clothes, the expensive organic cotton onesies Jessica insisted on, paid for with rental income from properties my family knew nothing about. The monitor crackled to life with their voices from the kitchen below. "I can't believe your mom reorganized the spice cabinet again," Jessica complained. "She moved everything around. I can't find anything." The spice cabinet. I'd alphabetized it because chaos made cooking harder, especially when preparing meals for people who never thanked me. But apparently, efficiency was another crime to add to my growing list. "She's probably bored," Daniel replied. "What else does she have to do all day?" What else did I have to do? Besides providing free childcare, housekeeping, cooking, and maintaining the home I owned while they lived their carefree lives. "Sometimes I wonder if this arrangement is working," Jessica continued. "She's always there. Watching everything we do. Always there. In my own house." I set down Emma's tiny socks and moved closer to the monitor, my heart pounding like it used to when Harold would surprise me with passionate kisses during business calls, reminding me that power and desire often walked hand in hand. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. "I mean, she hovers. Like yesterday when I was on the phone with my sister, she kept walking through the living room. It felt like she was listening. I had been listening." Jessica had been complaining to her sister about having to deal with Daniel's mother, describing me like a burden they'd graciously accepted rather than the woman whose property taxes funded their comfortable lifestyle. "She's probably lonely," Daniel said. "Dad's been gone 3 years. This is probably the most social interaction she's had since the funeral." Most social interaction. I attended bridge club every Tuesday, volunteered at the library every Friday, and maintained friendships spanning decades. But in their minds, I was a lonely old woman grateful for their company. Jessica's voice dropped lower. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and don't get mad. What? How long is she planning to stay? I mean, is this permanent? Permanent. Jessica wanted to know how long she'd have to tolerate the owner of her home living in her own house. I don't know, Daniel admitted. I assumed she'd want her own place eventually, but she seems settled here. Settled. Like I was a stray cat they'd fed who wouldn't leave. It's just that Emma's getting older, and I want more privacy. And honestly, your mom's getting more difficult lately. Difficult. Because I'd asked them to clean up after themselves. Because I'd suggested Emma needed more vegetables in her diet. Because I'd existed in their presence without being invisible. Difficult how? Daniel sounded genuinely curious. She questions everything I do with Emma. Yesterday she said Emma's bedtime was too late. Last week she rearranged the diaper bag because she didn't like my system. My system involved ensuring Emma had everything she needed. Jessica's system involved grabbing random supplies and hoping for the best. But apparently, competence was difficulty. Maybe we should start charging her rent, Jessica suggested. You know, to encourage independence. The irony hit me like a physical blow. Charge me rent to live in my own house, paid with income from investments they didn't know existed. I don't know, Daniel said slowly. That seems harsh. It's not harsh, it's realistic. She needs to contribute more than just babysitting. The utilities alone have gone up since she moved in. Utilities powered by automatic payments from my checking account. Groceries purchased with my credit card. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, all funded by the woman they wanted to charge for the privilege of existing in her own home. What if we can't afford to keep supporting her? Jessica continued. What if we decide to move somewhere smaller, more affordable? Move somewhere more affordable. Sell my house and move somewhere cheaper because supporting me was such a financial burden. Emma stirred in her crib, making soft baby sounds. I reached down to adjust her blanket, my hands trembling with rage that had nowhere to go except inward. She's lucky we don't put her in a home, Jessica's voice continued through the monitor. Most people her age aren't living in luxury like this. Lucky. I was lucky to live in luxury I'd earned through 40 years of smart investments and sacrifice while they planned to charge me rent for the privilege. That comment broke something inside me that had been cracking for weeks. The careful control I'd maintained, the strategic patience, the hope that they might remember I was family instead of hired help. Jessica laughed at her own joke, the sound sharp and cruel through the baby monitor speaker. Can you imagine? Sorry, Mom, but we need to downsize. Here's a nice assisted living brochure. Assisted living. At 68, with a net worth approaching $15 million, they thought I belonged in assisted living. Daniel's laughter joined hers. She'd probably cry and beg us to let her stay. Cry and beg. Like I was pathetic and powerless instead of the woman who could evict them tomorrow if I chose. I looked around Emma's nursery, the room I'd decorated, in the house I owned, filled with furniture I'd purchased for a granddaughter whose parents saw me as dead weight. The eviction papers waited in my desk drawer upstairs, signed and ready. Robert's number was programmed into my phone. One call could end this conversation forever. But first, I wanted them to understand exactly who they'd been mocking. I turned off the baby monitor and kissed Emma's forehead gently. She deserved better than parents who saw family as financial burden. She deserved to know her grandmother as more than just convenient childcare. Tomorrow, the game would change. Tonight, I'd let them sleep peacefully in their ignorance one last time. Jessica laughed. She's lucky we don't put her in a home. That's when I decided, game over. What's the cruelest thing someone said about you behind your back? How did you handle it? Friday morning, I told Daniel and Jessica I had errands to run downtown, leaving Emma with a babysitter I hired from the agency Jessica had interviewed months ago. The young woman cost $40 for 3 hours, Money that came from my investment account while my son and daughter-in-law probably wondered why I was suddenly spending their money so freely. Downtown Anchorage sparkled with October sunshine, the mountains visible in the distance like sleeping giants. Harold and I used to drive these streets looking for investment opportunities, his hand on my knee while I pointed out undervalued properties that would make us rich. Robert Patterson's law office occupied the 15th floor of a building Harold and I had considered buying in 1995. We decided against it because the price seemed too high at the time. Now it was worth triple what they'd asked. Eleanor. Robert stood when his secretary showed me in, genuine warmth replacing the professional politeness most people offered women my age. He'd known me when I was sharp and powerful, before grief and family expectations had dulled my edges. Robert, I need to understand something. I settled into the chair across from his mahogany desk, the same chair where Harold and I had signed countless contracts. Exactly how much am I worth? He pulled a thick folder from his cabinet, the same careful organization I remembered from our business dealings. Numbers filled the pages: property values, investment accounts, rental income statements. Current total assets, $14.8 million, he said, sliding the summary across his desk. Your rental properties alone generate $43,000 monthly in gross income. $43,000 monthly. More than Daniel's annual salary from his engineering job. More than Jessica spent on her shopping sprees and spa days combined. The downtown commercial building has appreciated significantly, Robert continued, his finger tracking down the page. We bought it for $600,000 in 2008. Current market value, $1.4 million. $1.4 million. For a building Daniel didn't know existed. What about liquid assets? I asked, feeling like my old self for the first time in years. Checking accounts, savings, certificates of deposit, stock portfolio, approximately $2.3 million in readily available funds. $2.3 million I could access tomorrow if needed. While my son worried about charging me rent to cover his expenses. Robert leaned back in his leather chair, studying my face. Eleanor, you're not just wealthy. You're independently wealthy. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life without touching your rental income. The reality hit me like ice water. While Daniel and Jessica planned my future like I was their financial responsibility, I could buy and sell their lives several times over. There's something else, Robert continued, pulling out another document. Your property taxes on the mountain estate are paid through automatic withdrawal from your investment account. $12,000 annually. What about utilities, insurance, maintenance? All automatic payments from your accounts. Daniel hasn't paid a single household expense since you moved in. Of course he hadn't. I'd set up those payments decades ago when Harold and I built the house. They'd simply continued after his death, invisible to everyone except the woman who'd arranged them. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Always. If I evict Daniel and Jessica, am I being cruel? Am I a terrible mother? Robert set down his pen and looked at me with the directness I'd missed for 3 years. Eleanor, you're not being cruel. You're being stupid. The word stung, but he wasn't finished. You're letting them treat you like hired help while you fund their entire lifestyle. You're accepting disrespect in exchange for scraps of affection from people who should be grateful for your generosity. But Daniel is my son. And you're his mother, not his servant. Harold would be furious if he saw how they're treating you. Harold. My chest tightened with familiar pain, but also with something else. Pride. Harold had always said I was too smart to let anyone take advantage of me. The property manager for your downtown building called yesterday, Robert continued, pulling out another folder. He's got 3 businesses interested in leasing the empty retail space on the ground floor. Premium rates. More income. While they counted pennies and planned to charge me rent. I signed the necessary paperwork authorizing increased rental rates across all my properties, feeling power flow back into my hands like electricity. This was who I'd been before grief made me small. Before family expectations made me invisible. One more thing, Robert said as I gathered my purse. I've prepared eviction notices for both Daniel and Jessica. Separate documents, so there's no confusion about who needs to leave your property. Both of them? Eleanor, you own the house. You decide who lives there. If you want to keep Emma close while her parents learn some humility, that's your choice to make. The papers felt substantial in my hands, like the property deeds Harold and I used to sign with champagne nearby and celebration in our future. Power documents that could reshape lives with a signature. Outside, downtown Anchorage bustled with afternoon energy. People hurried past carrying briefcases and coffee, building their own dreams and fortunes. Once upon a time, I'd been one of them. Time to remember how that felt. The property manager smiled. Mrs. Patterson, you're worth $15 million. Your son has no legal claim to anything. Have you ever discovered you were more powerful than you realized? What was that moment like? Back home, I found Jessica in my kitchen, going through my mail like she had every right to monitor my personal business. Eleanor. How were your errands? She held up a credit card statement, her eyes scanning the numbers with obvious curiosity. Wow, you've been spending quite a bit lately. My credit card statement. In my house. Being examined by someone who thought she had authority over my finances. Just the usual expenses, I replied, setting my purse down and mentally calculating how much rental income would hit my accounts next week. Enough to cover Jessica's entire annual clothing budget. Well, maybe we should talk about budgeting, she suggested with fake concern. Daniel and I noticed you've been hiring babysitters instead of just asking us to stay home with Emma. Asking them to stay home. In my house. To watch their own daughter. While I ran errands they assumed were frivolous shopping trips instead of meetings with lawyers and property managers. I can afford the occasional babysitter, I said carefully. Jessica laughed. I know you think you can, but $40 for 3 hours? That's expensive when you have family willing to help for free. Free help. From people living rent-free in my house, eating food I purchased, enjoying utilities I paid for, while treating me like their financial burden. That evening, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in Harold's study with the eviction papers spread across his desk like battle plans. The first document was straightforward, notice to quit and surrender possession of premises. 30 days for Daniel to vacate. The second, identical except for the name, 30 days for Jessica. My hand trembled as I held the pen. This was my son. The baby I'd nursed in the chair upstairs, the toddler who'd climbed into our bed during thunderstorms, the young man Harold and I had been so proud to see graduate college. But he wasn't that person anymore. He was someone who laughed about putting his mother in assisted living. Someone who saw my generosity as weakness and my presence as burden. I signed the first paper. Daniel Patterson. 30 days. The ink felt permanent, final, like the property deeds Harold and I had signed to build our empire. Each signature had changed our lives, moving us toward greater wealth and independence. The second signature came easier. Jessica Patterson. 30 days. She'd never carried my name through marriage, but she'd taken everything else, my home, my dignity, my role in my own family. Time to take something back. I folded both documents carefully and placed them in envelopes addressed to each of them. Tomorrow I'd serve them personally, watch their faces as they realized the free ride was over. My laptop chimed with an email from Robert. Eleanor, property management company found another tenant for the Muldoon Avenue property. Rent increase of $200 monthly effective immediately. $200 more monthly. While they worried about my spending $40 on a babysitter. I opened my investment account and checked the balance, $2,347,892 in readily available funds. Growing daily through compound interest and dividend payments. Money Harold and I had earned through decades of smart choices and sacrifice. Money my son thought I didn't have. The house creaked around me, familiar sounds of settling wood and shifting foundations. Harold and I had heard these same sounds for 20 years, lying in bed after successful negotiations, planning our next investment while his hands reminded me of all the reasons we made a perfect team. Tomorrow, Daniel and Jessica would learn that the woman they dismissed as desperate and grateful was actually the landlord who could end their comfortable life with 30 days' notice. But tonight, I'd let them sleep in ignorance one final time. I sealed both envelopes and set them on the kitchen counter where they'd see them first thing in the morning. Right next to the coffee maker I'd bought with my money, in the kitchen I'd designed, in the house they thought they'd inherited. The power felt clean and sharp, like the satisfaction Harold and I used to share after closing difficult deals. Like the rush of knowing you held all the cards while everyone else bluffed with empty hands. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the master suite Jessica thought belonged to her, and laid out my clothes for tomorrow. Something professional but comfortable. Something that said, property owner, instead of desperate grandmother. Something that would remind them who I'd been before grief made me forget my own strength. I signed the papers. 30 days. They had 30 days to remember I was their mother, not their employee. Have you ever had to give someone you love an ultimatum? Was it worth it? Monday morning arrived with the first snow of winter, soft flakes coating the windows like powdered sugar while I prepared breakfast for the family who had no idea their world was about to change. Daniel sat at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone, occasionally grunting responses to Jessica's chatter about her plans for the week. Emma gurgled happily in her high chair, innocent and beautiful, unaware that her parents' comfortable life was about to collapse. Mom, Emma's running low on that expensive formula she likes, Daniel said without looking up. Can you pick some up today? The expensive formula costs $60 per container. I'd been buying it for months without complaint, funding Emma's nutrition while her parents assumed someone else handled the bills. Of course, I replied, placing his coffee beside his elbow. Anything else you need? Well, since you're going out anyway, Jessica added, could you swing by the post office? I have returns to mail. Returns from shopping sprees funded indirectly by rental income they knew nothing about. Returns for clothes that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. I smiled and nodded, playing the helpful grandmother role one final time. The process server arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, just as I'd arranged. Professional, discreet, carrying the documents that would change everything. I watched through the living room window as he approached the front door, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Daniel answered the door with Emma on his hip, probably expecting a delivery or someone selling something. The conversation was too quiet to hear, but I saw his face change as he accepted the official-looking papers. Jessica. His voice carried panic as he closed the door. You need to see this. I continued loading the dishwasher, every movement calm and deliberate while chaos erupted behind me. What is it? Jessica's heels clicked across the hardwood floors I'd chosen and Harold had installed. It's an eviction notice. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Both of us. 30 days to vacate. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Emma made happy baby sounds, oblivious to the tension surrounding her. That's impossible, Jessica finally said. Who would evict us from our own house? Our own house. The phrase would have been funny if it weren't so tragically misguided. It says the property owner is Eleanor Patterson. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. More silence. I could practically hear their brains struggling to process information that contradicted everything they'd assumed about their lives. Your mom? Jessica's voice climbed higher. Your mom doesn't own this house. This is your father's house. This is our house. The papers look official, Daniel said slowly. Legal letterhead, signatures, case numbers. I turned around, drying my hands on the towel Harold had bought me for our last Christmas together. Both Daniel and Jessica stared at me like I was a stranger who'd suddenly appeared in their kitchen. Mom? Daniel held up the papers with shaking hands. What is this? Legal documentation, I replied calmly. Exactly what it appears to be. But you don't own this house. Jessica's voice bordered on hysteria. Harold left everything to Daniel. Harold left everything to me, I corrected gently. I leave everything to Daniel after my death. Until then, every brick, every board, every blade of grass belongs to me. Daniel's face went white. That's not possible. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I'd stored copies of all the property deeds, pulling out the folder that contained our life's work. Legal documents dating back decades, each one bearing Harold's signature beside mine. Purchase agreement, March 1987, I said, spreading the papers across the counter like a card dealer revealing a winning hand. Harold and Eleanor Patterson, joint tenants with right of survivorship. Daniel's hands trembled as he picked up the original deed. But Dad said. Your father said this would all be yours someday. He never said it was yours now. Jessica grabbed another document, scanning the legal language with desperate eyes. This can't be right. We've been living here for 3 years. You've been living in my house for 3 years, I confirmed. Rent-free. Rent-free? Daniel's voice cracked completely. Mom, we thought we were helping you. We thought you needed a place to live. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. I needed a place to live in my own house? But the expenses, Jessica protested. The utilities, the property taxes, the maintenance costs. All paid automatically from my investment accounts. Same as they've been for 20 years. Daniel sank into a kitchen chair like his legs couldn't support him anymore. How much are you worth, Mom? Enough that your living expenses don't burden me. That's not an answer. I looked at my son, this man who'd laughed about putting me in assisted living, and decided he deserved the complete truth. Approximately $15 million. The kitchen fell silent except for Emma's contented babbling and the soft tick of the clock Harold and I had bought in Italy during our 20th anniversary trip. 15 million? Jessica whispered. Property investments, rental income, stock portfolio, savings accounts. Your father and I built quite a substantial estate. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Jesus Christ, Mom. $15 million and you let us treat you like hired help? I suggested. Like a burden you were graciously supporting? Like dead weight you might need to put in a home? His head snapped up. You heard that conversation. Baby monitors work both ways, Daniel. Jessica started crying, ugly, desperate sobs that might have moved me a month ago. Now they just sounded like noise. We're sorry, she gasped. We didn't know. We didn't understand. You didn't understand that I deserve basic respect regardless of my bank account? I asked. You didn't understand that families shouldn't treat each other like free labor? Daniel stood up slowly, still holding the eviction notice. Mom, we can fix this. We can do better. You have 30 days to figure that out, I said simply. Somewhere else. But Emma. Jessica's voice broke. Emma is welcome to visit her grandmother anytime. After her parents learned some humility. Daniel shouted, Who owns this house? The process server smiled and pointed at me. That lady right there. Have you ever had a moment of perfect justice? How did it feel to be vindicated? The silence that followed the process server's words was deafening. Daniel stood there, papers trembling in his hands, his face cycling through colors like a broken traffic light. Jessica had gone completely white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. This is some kind of mistake, Daniel finally managed, his voice cracking like a teenager's. Mom, tell them this is wrong. Tell them you don't own this house. I continued folding Emma's tiny clothes, taking my time with each little sock. The cotton was so soft between my fingers, reminding me of all the baby clothes I'd folded for Daniel 32 years ago. Back then, he'd coo and reach for me with those chubby little hands. Now he couldn't even look at me without calculating what I could do for him. Eleanor. Jessica's screech cut through my memories. Say something. This is ridiculous. I set down the pink onesie and looked up at her. Really looked. Her designer jeans cost more than most people made in a week. The diamond studs in her ears caught the afternoon light streaming through my windows. My windows. In my house. Built with my money. What exactly would you like me to say, dear? Daniel waved the papers frantically. That you don't own this place. That there's been some mix-up with the legal system. I walked past them both, my step steady despite my healing hip. In Harold's study, I opened the mahogany file cabinet he'd insisted we needed. For important documents, he'd said, kissing my neck as we'd christened that desk all those years ago. The memory sent a familiar warmth through me. My hands found the folder labeled Real Estate, Primary Residence. I pulled it out, feeling the weight of 23 years of ownership in my palms. When I returned to the living room, they were huddled together like conspirators, whispering urgently. They fell silent as I approached. Here's the original deed, I said, placing the document on the coffee table Harold and I had picked out together. Purchased December 15, 2001. Harold Patterson and Eleanor Patterson, joint tenants with right of survivorship. Daniel snatched it up, scanning the legal language with desperate eyes. But Dad never said. Your father believed in teaching through experience, not handouts. I pulled out another folder. Here's the deed transfer from when Harold passed. Everything automatically became mine. As his widow. Jessica grabbed the paper from Daniel's hands. This can't be legal. We've been living here for 3 years. As my guests. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften them. Guests who forgot they were guests. I watched Daniel's world crumble in real time. His shoulders sagged as reality crashed over him. 3 years of treating me like hired help. 3 years of assuming he'd inherited something he'd never actually owned. Mom, I don't understand. His voice was small now, confused. Why didn't you tell us? The question hung in the air like smoke from a doused fire. Why hadn't I? Because I'd wanted to feel needed? Because I'd hoped they'd treat me with respect out of love, not legal obligation? Because some foolish part of me had believed my own son would never reduce me to a babysitter in my own home? Would it have mattered? I asked instead. Would you have treated me differently if you'd known? The silence answered everything. Jessica's confusion was morphing into something uglier. This is manipulation. You let us believe. I let you show me who you really are. I pulled out another document. Here's the property tax records. 23 years of payments. Every single one from Harold's and my accounts. Daniel stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. The utilities. Mine. Another folder. Insurance, maintenance, the new roof last spring when you complained about the leak over the master bedroom. The groceries. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Every single bag. I felt Harold's presence beside me, his invisible hand on my shoulder giving me strength. The clothes Emma wears, the diapers she needs, the formula you demanded I buy organic. Daniel collapsed into the leather recliner, Harold's chair. Seeing him there should have made me angry, but instead I felt something close to pity. My boy, lost and confused, learning that the world wasn't what he'd assumed. I need to see the bank statements, he said weakly. I handed him another folder without a word. 23 years of mortgage payments, all from accounts bearing Harold's and my names. Even after Harold's death, the automatic payments had continued from my personal accounts. Jessica was pacing now, her designer boots clicking against the hardwood floors Harold and I had chosen together. There has to be some mistake. Some loophole. You can't just... What? Evict my own son? I settled into my favorite chair, the one by the window where I watched the snow fall while Harold worked in his study. Yes, dear. I can. It's my legal right. Daniel looked up from the bank statements, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought Dad left everything to me. I thought. You thought you were entitled to it without earning it. The words cut through the room like Harold's old hunting knife. You thought I was just the old woman who happened to live here. Convenient free help. The tears came then, rolling down Daniel's cheeks like they had when he was 8 and had broken my favorite vase. But this time, I didn't rush to comfort him. I gave you 30 days, I said quietly. 30 days to figure out how to treat your mother with respect. Jessica screamed, "This is impossible." Her voice cracked with desperate rage. I simply smiled, feeling more alive than I had in months. Harold and I bought this land when you were in diapers, dear. Maybe it's time you learned that some people work for what they have. The next morning found me in Harold's leather chair, the one Daniel had collapsed into the day before. But this time, I belonged here. I'd always belonged here. The early sunlight streamed through the great windows, illuminating the deeds spread across Harold's mahogany desk like battle plans. Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and his clothes were wrinkled. Behind him lurked Jessica, her arms crossed and her face set in stubborn lines. "Mom, we need to talk." I gestured to the chairs across from me. "Please, sit." Daniel settled into his seat like a man approaching his own execution. Jessica remained standing, her jaw tight with barely controlled fury. "This is all wrong," she started, but Daniel held up a hand. "Jess, let me handle this." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Mom, I owe you an apology. A big one." I waited, my hands folded in my lap. Harold had always said I had a poker face that could make professional gamblers weep. "I've been treating you terribly. Like you worked for us instead of." He swallowed hard. "Instead of remembering you're my mother." The admission hung between us. Jessica shifted behind him, her designer boots squeaking against the floor. "I appreciate the apology, Daniel. But words are just words." He nodded miserably. "What do you want from me? How do I fix this?" Now Jessica couldn't contain herself any longer. "Fix this? She's the one who lied to us. She let us believe we owned this place." I turned my gaze to her, feeling Harold's strength flowing through me. "I never said you owned anything, dear. You made assumptions." "Assumptions?" Her voice climbed higher. "You let us paint the nursery. You let us renovate the kitchen. With my money." I pulled out another folder from Harold's filing system. Every receipt, every contractor payment. All traced back to my accounts. Daniel's head dropped into his hands. "Oh God, Mom." The kitchen renovation, that was $40,000. $43,612, I corrected. Harold always taught me to keep precise records. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. "This is insane. You can't expect us to move out with a baby. Where are we supposed to go?" I stood slowly, my hip protesting just slightly. The physical therapy was working, but I'd learned to use the hesitation for dramatic effect. "That's not my problem to solve." Daniel looked up at me, his eyes desperate. "Please, Mom. Give us more time. Let us figure something out. You have 28 days left. That's not enough time to find a place, pack, arrange movers. Then you'd better start today." Jessica threw her hands up. "This is ridiculous. We're family." The word hit me like a slap. Family. I thought about all the times I'd changed Emma's diapers while they slept in. All the meals I'd cooked while recovering from surgery. All the nights I'd walked the floors with a teething baby so they could rest. "Family," I repeated slowly. "Yes, let's talk about family." I walked to the mantelpiece where Harold's military photos stood in their silver frames. His bronze star caught the morning light, the same one Jessica had tried to throw away. When I was family, I was worth free babysitting. When I was family, my belongings were cluttered to be donated. When I was family, I was invisible unless you needed something. Daniel stood up, reaching toward me. "Mom, that's not." "It's exactly how it was." I turned back to face them both. "For 3 years, I've been the hired help who happened to share your last name." The silence stretched between us like a frozen lake, dangerous and uncertain. Finally, Daniel spoke. What would it take for you to let us stay? I settled back into Harold's chair, feeling his presence wrap around me like a warm embrace. That's an interesting question. Jessica perked up, sensing opportunity. We could pay rent. I almost laughed. With what money? The same money I've been providing for your groceries, utilities, and Emma's needs? Daniel's face flushed red. I have a job. A part-time job that barely covers your car payment. I'd done my research over the past few days. Amazing what a determined grandmother could discover when she put her mind to it. Jessica hasn't worked since Emma was born. I'm raising our daughter. In my house. With my resources. While treating me like the help. The truth landed like a physical blow. Jessica sank into the remaining chair, finally accepting that her standing position of defiance wasn't working. So what do you want? Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. I looked at both of them, really looked. Daniel, my boy, who'd grown up thinking the world owed him something. Jessica, who'd married into what she thought was wealth and security. Both of them learning that assumptions could be dangerous things. I want respect, I said simply. Not because you need something from me. Not because you're afraid of me. But because I'm your mother, your grandmother, and a human being worthy of dignity. Daniel nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. We can do that. Jessica remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. I want acknowledgement that this is my home. That you live here by my grace, not by right. Another nod from Daniel. And I want partnership in decisions that affect my house, my granddaughter, and my daily life. What kind of partnership? Jessica finally spoke, suspicion creeping into her voice. I smiled, feeling more alive than I had since Harold's funeral. The kind where the homeowner gets a vote. I leaned back in Harold's chair, surrounded by the evidence of a life well built and carefully maintained. You can stay, I said quietly. But we're starting over. I'm the grandmother you respect, not the help you exploit. Daniel's relief was visible, his shoulders sagging. But Jessica's expression remained guarded. And if we don't meet your standards, she asked. I thought of Harold, of how he'd always said I was most beautiful when I held my ground. Then you have 27 days to find alternative arrangements. 3 weeks passed before I saw real change. Not the desperate politeness of people trying to avoid consequences, but genuine shift in how they moved through my house. It started small. Daniel clearing his dishes without being asked. Jessica actually looking at me when she spoke instead of addressing the air over my shoulder. But the real test came on a Tuesday morning when Emma woke up crying at 6 a.m. I was already awake, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink through my bedroom window. Harold and I had planned this house so the master bedroom would catch the morning light. Nothing prettier than you in sunrise, he'd whispered during those planning sessions, making me blush like a newlywed. I heard Emma's cries through the baby monitor, followed by silence. Then footsteps in the hallway. I expected them to stop at my door, expected the tired knock and the assumption that Grandma would handle the early morning duty. Instead, I heard Jessica's voice, soft and singing, drifting through the walls. She was handling her own child, in her own time, without expecting me to be the automatic solution. When I went downstairs an hour later, Daniel was in the kitchen making coffee. Not just for himself, but 3 cups. He looked up when I entered, actually meeting my eyes. Morning, Mom. How'd you sleep? Very well, thank you. I accepted the coffee cup, noting that he'd used the good china instead of the chipped mugs he usually grabbed. Emma's feeling better? Yeah, just hungry. Jess is feeding her now. He hesitated, then added, we were thinking of taking her to the park later. Would you like to come with us? Not, can you watch her while we go out? Not, we need you to come help with the baby. An invitation. An actual invitation to join my family, not serve them. I'd love that. Jessica appeared then, Emma content in her arms. She looked tired but not resentful, not like someone who'd been forced to parent her own child. "Good morning, Eleanor." She'd stopped calling me Mom after the eviction notice, and I hadn't pushed. Some things had to be earned back slowly. "I hope we didn't wake you." "Not at all, dear." She settled at the kitchen table, adjusting Emma's position with practiced ease. "Daniel and I were talking last night about changes we need to make." I waited, sipping my coffee. Harold's voice echoed in my memory. "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen." Daniel sat across from me, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like it was an anchor. "We want to start contributing more. To the household, I mean." Jessica nodded. "I've been looking into remote work options. Data entry, customer service, things I can do while Emma naps. And I talked to my supervisor about going full-time," Daniel added. "There's an opening in the accounting department." I studied their faces, looking for the performance, the desperation of people trying to avoid eviction. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: shame. Real, genuine shame at how they'd been living. "Those sound like positive steps," I said carefully. Emma gurgled, reaching toward the morning light streaming through the windows. Jessica shifted her so she could see outside better, where the snow was beginning to melt in patches across the yard. "There's something else," Jessica said quietly. She looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not just sorry I got caught." She met my eyes directly for the first time in months. "I treated you like you were invisible. Like you didn't matter except when we needed something. That was cruel, and it was wrong, and I'm ashamed of myself." The words hung in the bright kitchen air. Emma babbled happily, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her. "I grew up thinking that if someone did things for me, it meant they wanted to," Jessica continued. "My grandmother was always doing for everyone, always cooking and cleaning and babysitting, and she seemed happy. I thought that's what grandmothers did." Daniel reached over and took her free hand. "We both did. We thought you offering to help meant you wanted to do everything. Even when I was recovering from surgery?" I asked quietly. Daniel's face crumpled. "Especially then. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. You were in pain, and we made it about us. About what we needed." Emma chose that moment to reach toward me, making those sweet baby sounds that melt even the most guarded hearts. I held out my finger, and she grasped it with surprising strength. "She loves you," Jessica said, watching the interaction. "Really loves you. Not because you do things for her, but because you're grandma." I felt tears prick my eyes, unexpected and hot. "I love her too. More than I knew I could love anything again." "We want to do better," Daniel said. "Not because we're afraid you'll kick us out, but because we want Emma to grow up seeing how family really treats each other." I looked around the kitchen Harold and I had designed together. The morning light, the smell of coffee, the sound of my granddaughter's happy chatter. This was what we'd dreamed of when we'd built this place. Not perfection, but connection. Not service, but partnership. "I want that too," I admitted. Jessica smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me in years. "Can you teach me to make your bread recipe? The one Emma loves so much?" The request was simple, but the meaning behind it was enormous. She wanted to learn from me, not just benefit from my labor. "I'd be happy to." Daniel cleared his throat. "And Mom? About the financial stuff. I know we can't pay market rent or anything close to it right now, but we want to contribute what we can. Even if it's small." I waved a hand dismissively. "This house has been paid for since 2019. I don't need rent money." "Then what can we do? How do we make this right?" I looked at Emma, then at her parents. 3 generations of family, learning how to be a family instead of a collection of people who happen to share a last name. "You can treat me like I matter. You can include me in decisions about Emma's care. You can remember that I'm not the help, I'm the grandmother who loves you all enough to teach you hard lessons." Jessica was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her cheeks. We can do that. We will do that. Emma released my finger and clapped her tiny hands together, as if applauding our breakthrough. And maybe, I added with a smile, you can start thinking of this as our home, not just the place where you happen to live. Daniel reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Deal. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was sitting at my own kitchen table with my actual family. 6 months later, I stood in the same kitchen, but everything had changed. The morning light still painted the mountains pink, but now it illuminated a different kind of household entirely. Jessica hummed while she made breakfast, Emma bouncing happily in her high chair. Not because she had to cook, but because she'd taken over breakfast duties as her contribution to our family routine. The bread she was toasting was from a loaf we'd made together the night before, her third attempt at mastering Harold's mother's recipe. Morning, Eleanor, she called over her shoulder as I entered. Coffee's fresh. Emma squealed with delight when she saw me, reaching with both chubby arms. Gamma. Gamma. My heart still skipped every time she said it. At 18 months, Emma was walking now, getting into everything with the fearless curiosity that made me remember Daniel at that age. Good morning, sweet pea. I kissed her forehead, breathing in that perfect baby smell that somehow made everything else fade away. Did you sleep well? She was up once around 3, but she settled right back down, Jessica reported, sliding eggs onto plates. I think she was just checking that we were all still here. Daniel appeared in the doorway, dressed for his new full-time position at the accounting firm. He'd been promoted twice in the past 6 months, proving that my son had inherited some of his father's work ethic after all. Morning, Mom. He kissed my cheek before settling beside Emma. Any plans for today? The property management company wants to discuss the rental portfolio, I said, accepting the perfectly prepared coffee Jessica handed me. And I thought Emma and I might visit the farmer's market afterward. Sounds perfect. Daniel wiped egg yolk from Emma's chin with practiced ease. Jess, don't forget you have that client call at 2. Jessica had found remote work with a marketing company, something she could do while Emma napped or played nearby. It wasn't making them rich, but it was giving her purpose beyond just being Emma's mother. Already on my calendar, she confirmed, settling with her own breakfast. Eleanor, would you mind if Emma stays with you during the call? It's with a difficult client, and I'd rather not have background baby noise. The request was so different from the old assumptions. She was asking, not expecting. Giving me information instead of just disappearing and assuming I'd handle everything. Of course. We can make cookies while you work. Emma clapped her hands. Cookie. Cookie, Gamma. After lunch, I told her firmly. Cookies are not breakfast food. Daniel laughed. She gets that sweet tooth from Dad's side of the family. It was the first time in years he'd mentioned Harold without sadness creeping into his voice. We were all learning to hold joy and grief in the same space. After Daniel left for work, Jessica and I settled into our morning routine. She handled Emma's post-breakfast cleanup while I sorted through mail and checked on household maintenance issues. We developed this natural division of labor over the months, based on preference and ability rather than assumption and exploitation. Eleanor, Jessica said as she wiped down Emma's high chair, I have something I want to discuss with you. I looked up from the property management reports. Her tone was serious but not worried, the voice of someone with something important to share. Daniel and I have been saving money. Between his promotion and my freelance work, we've managed to put aside almost $3,000. Emma Todd led over to me, dragging her favorite stuffed moose. I lifted her into my lap, feeling her warm weight settle against me. That's wonderful, dear. You should be proud. We want to set up a formal arrangement. For living here, I mean. Jessica sat across from me, her expression earnest. Not just contributing to groceries and utilities, but actual recognition that this is your home and we're your tenants. I studied her face, looking for ulterior motives and finding none. Why is this important to you? Because Emma needs to grow up understanding that nothing in life is free. That when someone gives you something valuable, you acknowledge it properly. Jessica reached over and smoothed Emma's hair. And because we need to feel like we're contributing adults, not charity cases. Emma babbled something that sounded like moose, and held up her stuffed animal for my inspection. Very nice moose, I told her solemnly, then looked back at Jessica. What did you have in mind? We researched fair market rent for a 3-bedroom house with acreage in this area. We can't afford market rate, but we could manage about $800 a month once Daniel's raise kicks in. I considered this. The house had been paid off for years, and my other properties provided more than enough income. But I understood what Jessica was really asking for: dignity. The chance to be partners rather than dependents. I have a counter-proposal, I said finally. What if instead of rent, you put that money into a savings account for Emma's future? College fund, wedding fund, whatever she needs when she's older. Jessica blinked in surprise. But then we're not contributing to the household. You cook 3 meals a week. You do all the grocery shopping. You handle Emma's doctor's appointments and daycare coordination. You maintain the flower gardens. I shifted Emma to face outward so she could see the room. Trust me, dear, you're contributing. Emma wiggled down from my lap and toddled toward her toy basket, leaving Jessica and me to finish our conversation. The money thing isn't about need, I continued. It's about Emma learning that families take care of each other in all kinds of ways. Some contribute labor, some contribute money, some contribute wisdom or time or love. What matters is that everyone contributes something. Jessica nodded slowly. So the savings account for Emma would be your financial contribution to the family. Her future is all our responsibility. She smiled, the same genuine expression that had become common over these past months. I like that idea better than rent anyway. Emma came back dragging a picture book, clearly expecting story time. I checked the clock, still an hour before Jessica's client call. One story, I told Emma, lifting her back into my lap. Then Mama has to work, and we'll make those cookies. As Jessica settled beside us on the couch and Emma opened her book to the first page, I felt Harold's presence like sunshine through the windows. This was what we dreamed of when we planned this house. Not perfect people living perfect lives, but real family learning how to love each other well. 1 year after the eviction notice that changed everything, I sat in Harold's study updating my will. Emma played quietly on the floor beside me, building towers with wooden blocks and knocking them down with delighted shrieks. The legal documents spread across the desk told the story of a life well lived and carefully managed. 15 properties across Alaska, investment accounts that had grown steadily over 43 years of marriage, and insurance policies that would ensure my family's security long after I was gone. But the most important document was the letter I was writing to accompany the will. Not for my lawyer or the probate court, but for Emma. For the woman she would become, and the lessons she would need to remember. My dearest Emma, I wrote in my careful handwriting, by the time you read this, I will be gone, but the lessons I want to share with you will live forever. Emma looked up from her blocks, babbling something that sounded almost like a question. I'm writing to you, sweet pea, I told her. For when you're all grown up. She smiled and went back to her construction project, completely absorbed in the serious business of building and destroying. I continued writing. The most important thing I can teach you is this: know your worth, and never let anyone treat you as less than you are. Not because of your age, your gender, or your relationship to them. You are valuable simply because you exist. Through the study window, I could see Daniel and Jessica working together in the garden. He was teaching her how to prune the rose bushes Harold and I had planted for our 20th wedding anniversary. Their voices drifted through the glass, easy and comfortable, the sound of two people who had learned how to be partners. It hadn't been a perfect year. There had been arguments and misunderstandings, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But we'd worked through each conflict instead of ignoring it, addressed each problem instead of letting it fester. The biggest test had come at Christmas, when Jessica's mother visited. Patricia had taken one look at our family dynamic and immediately tried to turn me back into the household servant, making demands and assumptions that reminded me uncomfortably of my own children's behavior a year earlier. But Jessica had surprised everyone, including herself, by firmly redirecting her mother's expectations. Eleanor is not the help, Mom. She's Emma's grandmother and our partner in this household. If you want coffee, the kitchen is that way. Daniel had backed her up without hesitation, and together they'd created boundaries that protected all of us. It was the moment I knew the lessons had really taken hold. Emma abandoned her blocks and crawled over to me, pulling herself up on the chair leg. At 2 years old, she was fearless and determined, qualities that reminded me of myself at her age. Up, Gamma. Up. I lifted her into my lap, settling her against me as I continued writing. The money your great-grandfather and I accumulated was never the most important part of our legacy. The properties, the investments, the financial security, these are tools, Emma. What matters is what you do with them. Emma grabbed my pen, trying to help with the writing. I guided her tiny hand across the paper, letting her make a few scribbles in the margin. Did you help Grandma write your letter? I asked her. Very good. The study door opened, and Daniel peered in. How are my girls doing? We're writing important letters, I told him. Very serious business. He grinned and came over to kiss the top of Emma's head. Mom, Jess wanted to know if you're joining us for dinner. She's making that chicken recipe you taught her. Wouldn't miss it. After he left, I returned to my letter. Your father and mother learned something very important this year, Emma. They learned that treating people with respect isn't about what those people can do for you. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves dignity, regardless of what they contribute to your life. Emma was getting sleepy, her head heavy against my chest. These afternoon quiet times had become precious to both of us, moments of peace in a busy household full of love and activity. The properties I'm leaving you come with responsibility, I continued writing. Not just the financial responsibility of management and maintenance, but the moral responsibility of using wealth wisely. Help people when you can. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Never use your advantages to diminish others. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, invisible in my own home, treated like free labor by my own family. That woman had been wealthy on paper but impoverished in spirit. The transformation hadn't come from gaining money or property. It had come from remembering my own value and insisting that others recognize it too. The hardest lesson for your parents to learn was that love without respect isn't really love at all, I wrote. When people truly care about you, they consider your feelings, your needs, your dignity. They don't assume you exist for their convenience. Emma had fallen asleep in my lap, her breathing soft and even. I held her with one arm while I finished the letter with the other, thinking about the woman she would become. You will face people who try to diminish you, Emma. Who will assume you're less capable, less intelligent, less worthy because of your age or gender or any other excuse they can find. When that happens, remember your great-grandmother's story. Remember that you have the power to set boundaries, to demand respect, to walk away from situations that don't serve your highest good. I signed the letter and sealed it in an envelope marked, for Emma, to be opened on her 18th birthday. The will itself was straightforward. Emma would inherit the bulk of the estate, with provisions for her education and care until she came of age. Daniel and Jessica would receive enough to ensure their security but not so much that they'd never need to work or grow. But the real legacy wasn't in the legal documents. It was in the family we'd rebuilt together, the respect we'd learned to give each other, the understanding that love requires both care and dignity. As the sun set over the mountains Harold and I had chosen to call home, I held my sleeping granddaughter and felt complete. Not because I'd reclaimed my house or asserted my financial power, but because I'd reclaimed something far more valuable. I'd reclaimed my place in my own life. And in teaching that lesson to my family, I'd given Emma the most precious inheritance of all, the knowledge that she would never have to fight for her own worth because she'd always known exactly what she was worth. That, my dear listeners, is worth more than all the money in Alaska.